northern Arizona forest. It was near dusk on November 5th, 1975. A truckload of forestry workers were making their way home when they saw something strange to one side of the road. They stopped, and one of them, Travis Walton, got out to take a closer look. As he got nearer, something happened that made his companions panic.
It was hovering up here, just below the tops of the trees, and it was about 20-25 feet in diameter.
What he saw was a bright object hovering in midair.
When I got up about here, I crouched down behind a log, and I could hear a sound coming from it. It was kind of a very strange mechanical sound. And I was kind of wrestling with the idea of being so close to this. I'd expected it to take off, you know, and in running up here, I figured this was my last chance to, you know, to see this thing up close. But I decided I'd better get the hell out of there. And as I raised up and turned to go, I felt this numbing shock and blacked out. The guys in the truck said they saw this brilliant beam come out of the bottom of the craft and hit me in the head and the chest and knocked me flying through the air.
When his companions returned to the scene, they found no sign of Travis. He maintains that he blacked out and came to inside a strange room.
I didn't regain consciousness very quickly. I was very groggy and in a lot of pain. But when I could finally focus my eyes, I saw these creatures standing over me, which just flipped me out immediately. I was pretty hysterical. I was screaming all kinds of things at them, and they started towards me. And I grabbed a thing off of the table there and lashed out at them, and they stopped. They just kind of put their hands out like that at me, and then they just turned around and left the room. And I was afraid they'd come back, so I was going to try to find a way out of there. I guess I kind of assumed I was still, you know, or that the craft was still here in the woods. But I went looking for a way out. I went into another room, and as I was looking for a way out, another being came in, and this was a very human-appearing person. He led me out of this craft, which appeared to be parked inside of a larger building or a larger craft. He just took me right out of there, down a hallway to a room where there were some other people who looked like him. They put this mask over my face. It was kind of like an oxygen mask thing. There was no hose connected to it. They put it over my face, and that was the last thing I knew. I just blacked out.
Travis Walton says that the incident ended 4 days later when he found himself lying at the side of a road not far away. One explanation for what happened may lie in the working of the human brain, according to Dr. Persinger.
Now, the area we're interested in is right through here, right below this particular fissure. And this is called the temporal lobe. And to appreciate the structures we're really interested in, we'd have to cut the brain this way, transversely or coronally. Now, this particular part of the brain is one of the most electrically unstable regions throughout the entire area. If one stimulates this region right here, which is the hippocampal region, and including the amygdaloid area, one can get all types of experiences, such as the release of dream-like experiences into the waking state, a modification of memory, even partial amnesia, and a confabulation, that is, the filling in of that amnesia or that blank space with fantasy. And that fantasy is a function of what the person believes or has been taught or has experienced. One of the most interesting aspects of stimulating this part of the brain is the meaningfulness of it. There's a cosmic experience type of effect by stimulating this part of the brain. In fact, it is very similar to a type of religious experience.
Dr. Persinger feels that what happened at Fatima in Portugal in the early years of this century can be explained in this way.
Several thousands of people saw a luminous display. They thought it was the sun because they had no other word for it. They called it the sun, but it was below the clouds. Right? Estimated 30,000 people saw that event. Those that were closest to it had the richest imagery and experience. Those that were far away only saw a ball of light. Those that were very close and of one religious persuasion saw Joseph or whatever. Those that were of another religious persuasion thought they saw Christ. The camera only saw a ball of light.
Persinger believes that a similar luminous display had an effect on Travis Walton.
The Travis Walton case supports the model extraordinarily well. He is basically a almost 6-foot conductor, semiconductor that walked very close to the tremendous luminous display, tremendous potential there. The discharge occurred between him and the part of his body that was closest to the ball, which was his head and his chest. The ensuing events seemed to indicate a case of partial amnesia and of consequent confabulation. In other words, the amnesia of those 3 or 4 days were filled in with fantasy. But the point is, since the part of the brain that is involved with memory and experience was modified by this severe shock, he would not necessarily be lying. He may actually believe that that's what happened to him.
Others wanted to be sure. The National Enquirer has long had an interest in UFOs and in selling newspapers. They asked Walton to take a lie detector test and called in the services of Jack McCarthy.
I received a call at my home asking me to come to the Sheraton Hotel in Scottsdale and not to tell anybody where I was going, period. Well, naturally, I told my wife and picked up my portable equipment and left for the hotel.
A lie detector is used to reveal whether a person is telling the truth by measuring pulse rate, respiration, and blood pressure. Some experts, however, doubt its reliability. But after 2 hours of questioning and recording the reactions, McCarthy thought he had the answer.
When I completed my examinations, after reading my charts, I rendered the opinion to the reporters from the National Enquirer that the charts were deceptive and that, in my opinion, he was attempting to perpetrate a UFO hoax. Well, the lid blew off the room. I thought his brother Dwayne was going to throw me off the balcony. He was raging like a bull, saying there's no way that his brother would lie. And his charts were very, very clear, obviously deceptive. And prior to the examination, the reporters from the National Enquirer, I forgot to mention this, asked me if I would have any objection ahead of time to having pictures taken of my charts, the equipment, and myself following the examination. I said, no problem. Well, after I rendered my opinion, the pictures were completely forgotten. They had no more interest in pictures. But what they did do, they went into an adjoining room and drew up a little form for me to sign, asked me to sign it, to the effect that I wouldn't reveal where I had been that day, that I would say nothing about this examination, and so forth and so on.
Travis Walton argues that he failed the test because he was excessively nervous as a result of his recent close encounter with aliens.
Despite his claim of being overly nervous, his reactions on the chart are in itself a disclaimer to that contention. He was not overly nervous. His reactions were normal. They were very deceptive. And in my opinion, he was lying and did not take any UFO trip.
So McCarthy felt the entire experience was a hoax. Travis Walton was given another test sometime later, which he did pass, although the procedure used has been criticized. Despite the controversy, the National Enquirer gave the forestry workers the UFO Encounter of the Year award, with checks amounting to a total of $5,000.
We've just heard from Wellington radar that we've got an object about a mile behind us and it's following us. Of course, we can't see it. Let's hope they're friendly.
2 to 3 years later, on New Year's Day 1978, television news broadcasts throughout the world carried what is perhaps the most widely publicized UFO sighting of all time.
They're still there. You can see the ones to the right of us are still reasonably bright.
These pictures of the UFO were shot in New Zealand by a film crew that happened to be aboard a plane in the area.
It's really getting a bit frightening up here. There's a whole formation of unidentified flying objects behind us. We'll just have to wait to see what happens.
This is how the news reported it, but it might be worthwhile to take a closer look at what actually happened that night. The film was shot from this, an Argosy freighter. We asked the pilot, Captain Bill Startup, to take us through part of what happened that night, flying the same route. The Argosy had already made one trip earlier. It had flown from Wellington in the North Island down the coast to Christchurch. It was on the return trip heading north that the most dramatic sightings were made. They started shortly after takeoff.
New Zealand 518 listening out.
Now we just come out, climbed out, and we're through 1,500 feet nearly, and we spot this big bright light on the horizon over there. And it's just like the moon, full moon coming up. So I turned the aircraft radar on, and there, see, right about 20 miles away was an image. It's certainly far brighter than any boat we ever came across. So we continued to climb out, and it held the position relative to us the whole way, just constant, as though in fact you were closing on a boat. But it was a big image, and we just continued to watch it. It was just a fascinating bright light at that stage.
They maintained the northerly course, filming the strange light intermittently, until eventually curiosity got the better of them, and they decided to take a closer look.
We were 35 miles out now, and the light had come right close to us. So, and it appeared to be passing underneath. So I decided we'd have a look at it.
Here, they diverted to the right of their planned course and obtained most of the really striking pictures later shown on the news.
The UFOs began dancing around the aircraft just 3 minutes after takeoff from Christchurch. At one time, there were as many as 6. Radar in the aircraft and on the ground confirmed the unidentified flying objects about 10 miles from the plane. Using a slow-motion freeze frame technique, the incredibly clear contours of the huge craft can be seen. The cameraman and reporter reckoned it was at least 100 feet long. There was clearly a dome on top of the saucer shape, and through the camera lens, streams of lights could be seen whirling round the object.
Part of the drama of those pictures seems to be the result of the cameraman changing the focus of the image, making it overlarge and mysterious in appearance. But what about the rapid whirling movements of the UFO? The film shot on the plane that night has now been analyzed by an American scientist, Bruce Maccabee. An optical physicist and a believer in UFOs, here he is determining the original brightness of the light. The frame's convoluted loop, recorded in a 20th of a second, is believed by some to be proof of the extraordinary maneuverability of the alien spaceship. But now, even Bruce Maccabee accepts this is unlikely.
Well, the shape of this loop, in my interpretation, is that the camera was bumped. The alternative suggestions is that there were normal vibrations going on, and somehow the camera stopped running for one frame. And of course, the third alternative is that the object itself made some sort of a high-speed motion. But I tend towards the bumping theory myself.
But Maccabee does feel that other movements of the light show that it is under intelligent control.
That rolling and turning, again, is not a natural occurrence of any known thing. Certainly isn't an airport beacon or whatever that would have been on the ground and in some fixed position. So I would say that there are indications of intelligence, but where that intelligence came from, how it got there, there's no direct indication of that.
Others are equally convinced that the flashing lights are navigation beacons, and that the rapid movement is the effect of vibration and bumping on a handheld camera, in the same way that these airport lights roll and turn. It is suggested, however, that the out-of-focus light seen earlier was something else. One of these, a lone Japanese squid boat. Each summer, a huge fleet of them regularly fish the New Zealand waters. As they work through the night, they are festooned with powerful lights. Maccabee accepts that the light intensity is about right for a squid boat approximately 10 miles away. But he thinks it was moving too